Good evening, IFL Nation, and welcome to tonight's follow-up video. I am recording this one because, as some of you know, my live stream from yesterday on Thursday was abruptly taken down by YouTube, who had their screening procedure setting my video as promoting online gambling. So, had to appeal the decision. The good news is they came back to me today and they said that the diagnosis there was a false positive, so they ended up reinstating my video. That is the good news. The bad news is it's only 37 minutes long, so it cuts into my in-game preview of the first game of Week 19, which is the Iowa Barnstormers and the Jacksonville Sharks. So this video is meant to serve as a replacement to that other one. Where I'm going to experiment this time with not sharing the DraftKings screen, because I think that might have had something to do with not only last week's takedown, but also the age restriction that was put on my video a few weeks ago. So we're going to try to adapt here, try something a little bit different, and have the game-by-game previews as part of the presentation piece. So all of that nonsense having been said, let's get into the opening game of Week 19, which is the Iowa Barnstormers taking on the Jacksonville Sharks. The point spread for this game is Jacksonville favored by 21.5. The over-under is 84 in the hook. And on the money line, Iowa a plus 800 payout, and Jacksonville minus 1350 for the outright win. Iowa enters this game with a record of 1-13. So the goal for Andre Coles, the head coach, over these next couple games is to see which players will seize the opportunity to rise up and perhaps be a cornerstone piece of helping Iowa finally turn things around. In missing the playoffs this season, the postseason drought for the Barnstormers is now at 4 games, having not qualified for the IFL playoffs since the 2022 season, with, astoundingly, just 10 regular season wins in the past 4 years combined. So certainly not the turnaround year that Coles and the Barnstormers were hoping for. But they do have some encouraging pieces that possibly could stick around. David Elder at running back, very good signing, probably the best signing that Iowa's had this season. Some pretty talented receivers as well. Curtis Ravenel has led the group for the majority of the year, and DeMonte Martin has played some pretty inspiring football in the past handful of games as well. So the undoing for the Barnstormers offense this year has really been at the quarterback position. From Harry Rubidoux to now Aaron Aiken, the Barnstormers have started 6 different starting quarterbacks in that sequence. So unsurprisingly, they have been one of the, for lack of a better term, least productive offenses in the IFL. Whereas their defense, which had already been among the bottom half in the league to begin with, they've dealt with some serious injuries, particularly to their heartbeat player Tyler Tate on the defensive line. Since Iowa's win against Quad City in Week 8, the Barnstormers have given up over 55 points on a per-game basis. Not exactly the form that you want to be in heading into this matchup with the playoff-bound Jacksonville Sharks, who have not been without their troubles recently either. They have lost 4 consecutive games, although it should be noted that those games were very challenging situations. Even before factoring in the switch at quarterback from the departed James Cahoon to Sammy Edwards, the 4 opponents in that stretch are all either teams getting to the playoffs or are a game away from clinching the playoffs. 3 of those 4 games also being on the road. And their largest margin of defeat in any of those 4 games, 12 points at Orlando. So, like I was saying last night, it's not like the Sharks are suddenly getting their teeth kicked in. These are fairly competitive losses where, ironically, their undoing has been the defense, which has given up at least 54 points in every single one of those losses. That has offset a pretty admirable offensive effort under Edwards that has contributed at least 42 points in each of those 4 defeats. So on the defensive side, you're looking for impact plays from guys like Chris Rice on the defensive line, Dylan Brown and Michael Moore out in that linebacker and secondary positions. This Profiles is a very interesting game, and for those who look at Jacksonville's recent form and might want to fade that minus 21.5, I do get it. I also do like the over on this game, given the fact that the Sharks have had 4 consecutive games go over. Obviously, the question mark surrounding Iowa's offense would be the counter argument to that. But in terms of this game, my selection is going to be Jacksonville at minus 21.5. In truth, in my mind, this profile is very similarly to another game that saw a playoff contender travel for a game against a bottom-rung opponent on the heels of 4 straight ATS losses. The scenario that I'm talking about, of course, was the Vegas Nighthawks and New Mexico Chupacabras, which, ironically enough, Vegas was also minus 21.5 for that game. What ended up transpiring was a very inspired effort by Vegas's defense. I know injuries kind of ravaged New Mexico throughout that game, so obviously can't play around that little nugget. But we've seen Jacksonville's ceiling this year. It is sky high. They started 9-1 for a reason, and I feel like this 0-4 stretch is kind of clouding that a little bit. And as a 1994 movie once notably quoted, the clouded mind sees nothing. So for this pick, we're taking a full picture view. We are relying on the high standard from head coach Jason Gibson and the rest of that staff to see one through and help Jacksonville get a convincing win to just kind of reset that meter a little bit. They'll take any sort of doubt of qualification for the playoffs out of the equation. My final score prediction here, Jacksonville 59 and Iowa 30. So looking for the Sharks to take care of business at home to lead off this week. The next game is at 8 o'clock on Saturday. It involves the Quad City Steamwheelers and the Tulsa Oilers. The Steamwheelers, who were eliminated in the regular season last week for the first time since the 2019 season. They are on the road as underdogs by 10.5 points. The over-under is 84.5. Quad City's plus 310 on the money line, and Tulsa is minus 395. We talked about Quad City. Their season has been reduced to simply playing for pride and auditioning for future roles over the course of these next 2 games, which, ironically enough, both of them are going to be against the same Tulsa team. This is the first of a true home-and-home series with the return match in Moline on next Saturday. The big question here for Quad City is going to be, being in uncharted waters, what is that roster management going to look like for head coach Corey Ross, particularly at the quarterback position? Because you know what you're going to get at this point out of Daquan Neal. Longtime league veteran, obviously the option that gives Quad City the best chance of potentially playing spoiler. But with the season's outcome firmly in hand at this point, might Ross want to take another closer look at either one of Judd Roberts or Ivan Corbin? It's a very, very fair question to ask. And it's one where whichever decision is made is probably going to set the tone for how valuable or not these propositions turn out to be. No doubt, the Steamwheelers came in as one of the most talented teams in the league with amongst the most promise after finishing as the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference last year. Unfortunately, just didn't realize their full potential this year. for whatever reasons or another. Small mistakes here and there really added up. Their last game against Fisher is very emblematic of that. They had a very, very realistic chance of taking the lead late against the Fisher's Freight. But unfortunately, a fumble for them inside Fisher's territory ultimately spelled their demise. Again, they haven't necessarily played poorly, but I think the expectations may have gotten a little bit out of hand for this team. So they're going to have their hands full here against the team that is perhaps the hottest in the IFL right now. The Tulsa Oilers, winners of 7 straight, making that 2-5 start seem like probably one of the most incredulous mirages I've seen in the league in my now 5 years of covering it. You look across that roster, and you've just got outstanding players left and right that have just gelled incredibly well together. TJ Edwards, if there was a Comeback Player of the Year award, he would probably have it won already. Mid-season additions like running back Caleb Ramsey, wide receiver TJ Davis, who was a first-team All-IFL wide receiver last year for Green Bay, adding some unbelievable girth to that offense. Not to mention a career year out of Jerminic Smith that has him right in the conversation for Offensive Player of the Year. Consequently, that Tulsa offense has scored at least 45 points in all 7 of their wins. So that's made the lift much, much easier for their defense, which on its own can honestly hold their own. They've got some pretty talented pieces there as well, led by the mayor of Tulsa himself, Trey Harvey. Very, very versatile player all around as well. And so a win in this game for Tulsa would finalize their spot in the Eastern Conference playoff field. The question then becomes, would they slot in as the number 2 seed and host playoff football for the first time in franchise history? Or do they stick around at the 3 seed or possibly drop to the 4 seed, depending on the outcome of games across the league? So, looking at my pick for this game, I've got Tulsa at minus 10.5. And for as much of a vote of confidence this is in Tulsa's recent form, the same can also be said, the same can also be true about Quad City and their relative drop-off in terms of quality when playing on the road versus being within the friendly confines of Vibrant Arena. In total this season, if you look at just the spread record, Quad City 1-6 against the spread in away games, with that only win in that sequence coming at Iowa. So not exactly confidence-inspiring if you're looking for that. And again, this all boils down to what does the starting quarterback spot look like for Quad City? Very, very much a 50-50 shot. It could go either way. But if we do get the benefit of the doubt here, and it is either Roberts or Corbin getting the start, the ceiling of that Quad City offense just gets much, much lower, which surprisingly under Neal was never really what it was in 2025 to begin with. So I'm predicting Tulsa to stay hot in this game. I do think they get their win streak up to 8 games. Final score prediction here is 53-34 in favor of the hosts. So this is a second straight game where we've got the home team. Third game of Saturday night is at 10 p.m. The New Mexico Chupacabras wrap up their regular season with a road date at San Diego with their eyes set on a potential clinch of the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. All they got to do is beat New Mexico, and they can rest easy until August. The spread for this game is San Diego at minus 20.5. The over-under is 83.5. The money line has New Mexico at plus 800 and San Diego at minus 1350. New Mexico, there was a lot of hype surrounding them leading up to this season, resurrecting from their previous incarnation as the Duke City Gladiators. Unfortunately for the fans out in Land Enchanted that have waited 2 years for this version of football, the Chupacabras have just simply been snake bitten this season, particularly in this last stretch of 2 or 3 games, with the amount of injuries that they've had to sustain. Not to mention the exodus of some of their top talent over the course of the season due to disagreements from players to coaching staffs to management, so on and so forth. There was a little bit of promise for New Mexico when they started Guillermo Serrano at quarterback in last week's game against the Northern Arizona Wranglers. He did complete 7 of 10 passes, gave the offense a little bit of a threat in the passing game that's been, for the most part, lacking throughout the season. Certainly is a nice change of pace over having to resort to running back LaJames White taking snaps out of the Wildcat for consecutive quarters at a time. But whatever the case is, New Mexico right there with Iowa as one of the least scary offenses in the IFL, as they have yet to really figure out a long-term solution at quarterback since their trade of Jerome Johnson back in May. Defensively, they've started to feel the effects of a lackluster offense. The defense has been pretty much gouged throughout the majority of their recent losses. They've had games where they have given up 71 points. They had a game where they gave up 74 earlier this season against San Antonio. And then they had a game where they gave up 61 at the hands of the Arizona Rattlers when the two teams played in New Jersey. So there is talent there, like Gleason Spreewell and Greg Dent in the secondary as two of the more notable names. But you need more than 2 players to hop in and contribute in order to compete on a week-to-week basis in the IFL. San Diego, this is their first game against a, shall we say, lower-rung opponent in quite some time. Each of their past 4 games have been against teams with winning records, and for a team that had entered that stretch of games without a win against a team above 500, they passed that stretch with flying colors. They went 3-1. Their only hiccup, a very uncharacteristic 29-point loss at home to the Arizona Rattlers. So the good news for San Diego is that if you win this game on Saturday night, you will avoid Arizona until at least the Western Conference Final, given the fact that San Diego would be the 1 seed and they would host either Tucson or San Antonio, whoever winds up emerging from that race as the number 4 seed. Even though the Strike Force have kind of, by the metrics, been slightly above average in both offense and defense, we all know that their ceiling is way, way beyond that as potentially best in the league on one of their better days. An offense with guys like Nate Davis at quarterback, Eddie Vander at running back, Shane Hooks at receiver. And then along the defense, you've got guys like Elijah Reed at defensive back, Roy C. at linebacker, and Alan Anderson along the defensive line, who's having quite the season himself. Probably going to be a first or at the very least second team All-IFL honoree in that position group. So let's dive into a selection for this game. It continues the theme of Saturday night, where we are going home team on the spread minus 20.5. This one, to quote a friend of mine, is a do not overthink it type of situation. Obviously, there's going to be some potential game script issues with this one. For example, if San Diego gets ahead super early, and then they just trot out Kyle Kelly, the backup quarterback, to take the last 20, 25 minutes of the game or whatever. We could get some reserves in on defense as well to get them some reps leading up to the playoffs. That could allow for a backdoor cover situation, but yeah, with New Mexico's offense in a state of constant flux, it's important to remember that their 33 points in last week's game, I believe, was their single game high for a road game all season long. So that's just simply not going to cut it against a top-notch team like San Diego, whose last game, by the way, they went for 52 at Vegas, who's got one of the more vaunted defenses in the circuit. So prediction for this one, as much as it looks weird on paper, I've got the 60-something to 20-something blowout here. 62 to 28 to be exact. There really should be no doubt about this game at all, though it should be noted the last time these two teams met, the Chupacabras raced out to a surprising 19-0 lead before San Diego kind of punched back and wound up taking command of that game in the late stages of the fourth quarter in that one. A game they ended up winning 55 to 45. So certainly a precedent for New Mexico to get this number, especially with how tilted it is. But the reality of the fact here is that one team is preparing for the playoffs and the other team is making preparations for 2027. So that's 3 picks, and we have 3 home teams covering their respective spreads. We move on to Sunday with the Arizona Rattlers at San Antonio to take on the Gunslingers, a game where the feel of it is going to depend entirely on the outcome of the New Mexico. I'm sorry, the outcome of the New Mexico and San Diego game. If San Diego wins, Arizona is locked into the number 3 seed, and they have nothing to necessarily gain from a win in this game, which is their season finale. For the time being, though, Arizona is favored by 10.5 with the over-under 76.5. On the money line, Arizona is minus 395 and San Antonio is plus 310. Arizona, they've got themselves a double-digit win. Once again, I believe the 16th time in 17 seasons. Pretty much ridiculous. Pretty much the Gonzaga men's basketball of indoor football, if you sit down and think about it long enough. But yeah, their roster situation is going to be very, very interesting. They're not going to be able to rest everybody because it is a 26-man roster and you do have to dress 22. But you can rotate a lot more and manage reps that way. Something that Arizona could also do is if they do wind up giving Max Myler the QB1 role for the playoffs, you let Drew Powell take this game. He showed in the mid stages of the season that he is capable of moving this offense and moving it efficiently. And so a lineup here against San Antonio's defense, which has been sneaky good throughout the balance of the season, should prove to be an iron sharpens iron type of situation. Again, if that's the scenario. Obviously, if New Mexico shocks the IFL world and gets an upset of the Strike Force, then everything is off in that regard, and you're pretty much getting a normal Arizona attack. But yeah, it's been a great season for Arizona. They've gotten outstanding seasons from guys like Arlen Bruce at receiver, along with Corey Reed, Kimani Clark, Ron Brown Jr. But really what separated Arizona's success this season, you could argue, their defense. Very, very young defense where several youngsters have really established themselves as elite options in this league already. Yashin McKee Sr., Karlvansky DeCius, 2 of the examples of their young secondary, which, again, those rookies augmented by guys like Devontae Merriweather with IFL championship experience, the latter of which ended up winning the IFL championship MVP 2 years ago when Arizona dispatched of Massachusetts in that game that we shall never discuss ever again. But in any event, For San Antonio, this is their season right here. If they lose, they have no hope of qualifying for the playoffs. And I think for their sake, they're actually hoping for a San Diego win on Saturday with the chances of potentially capitalizing on maybe an atypical Arizona lineup. Um, the defense or the offense for San Antonio, they've had their well documented issues, but better late than never, they've actually put up 40 or more points in 3 of their last 4 games, as a bunch of their top options are finally healthy at exactly the right time. Joaquin Collazo got the start last week against the Orlando Pirates, led a 54-point effort, so would be very surprising if Jonathan Bain reverted to Zach Calzada, although there might be a matchup potential that he sees there. Regardless of who starts, though, Zach Patterson at running back has been a very stable force in both the rushing and receiving game. You've also got pretty good receivers out there like Dion Cook, Dion McShane. Austin Upshaw was there as well, Derrick Rose. So again, it's not like San Antonio has not had options on offense. It's just been either the play calling or the execution or that ever-revolving quarterback carousel that had kind of set them back for the first few months of the season or so. As mentioned before, San Antonio defense, sneaky, sneaky good. Terry Beckner Jr. along the defensive line, another outstanding player at that position. Riverius Rivers lining up to be potentially first-team All-IFL in the secondary. Lightning bolt in the special teams game, too, as a kick returner. So, very interesting game. Admittedly, it is tough to project at this moment in time. Though if you are looking for value in the here and now, I'm going to go bold here and say look no further than San Antonio on the money line. I have not very often throughout this series history gone for a plus 300 or longer odds money line bet, but it is the time of season where you kind of have to start taking risks a little bit, so why not do so here? Really, again, this boils down to the outcome of New Mexico-San Diego. If the Strike Force take care of business as expected and win, Arizona is not going to push full force just for the sake of improving the record to 11-5, especially with the experience of the franchise as a whole. They've been in this position several times before. You could argue that they are the masters of knowing how to deal with situations like this at the end of the regular season. In fact, if you look back at last season, Arizona was in the same boat where they knew exactly where they were going to be. They were going to be the 2nd seed. Their last game was on the road against San Diego, and the Strike Force ended up winning that game. So Kevin Guy knows what he's doing along that coaching staff. He's not going to put any of his star players in harm's way if the situation does not call for it. So San Antonio, with their backs completely against the wall, they know they have to execute, and I think they do just enough here to potentially, like I said, capitalize on this unique set of circumstances here. So I'm going to go out and predict a 43-36 San Antonio victory. It should be a very close game any way you slice it. But the Gunslingers have proven that they are capable of sticking around in games against some pretty solid opponents, especially considering that their past 2 losses have been by 1 point apiece. So they are right there scratching the surface of an upset. This seems like a prime one to get the job done here, especially at this number. Last game of the week is the Northern Arizona Wranglers, who are trying to snap a 15-game road losing streak dating back to 2024. They will have to do so against the Tucson Sugar Skulls, who are favored in this game by 4.5 points. The over-under is 84.5. On the money line, Northern Arizona's plus 150 and Tucson is minus 180. Northern Arizona comes in, and they are on a win streak, if you can believe it, despite a season-long 3-11 record. They have won each of their last 2 games, most recently against New Mexico, and their previous one against this same Sugar Skull team, actually, back in Prescott Valley, in which the Wranglers rallied from down 15 points, relying on some clutch defense late, especially by Brandon Looper, to come away from that game with a 2-point victory. But again, they're going to have their work cut out for them in terms of ending some of these road woes that they have been exhibiting for the past couple years. And again, we have to do that whole cause and effect critical thinking. If San Antonio does win this game, or their game against Arizona, that puts the pressure then on Tucson to have to win this game in order to formally clinch their spot for the playoffs, which would be their first time in the postseason since 2023. For Northern Arizona, you're just looking for continued success off the really good quarterback play of Anthony Garrett, who, in my mind, has cemented a starting role in this league going forward, whether that's for Northern Arizona or another team. He has showed quite the feel for the game. Seemingly has a pulse for it. Hasn't been without rookie mistakes at times, but guy is a playmaker. And the rapport that he has shown with some of his receivers like Kayron Ashley and Marlon Cook has been really, really special to watch. Obviously, the results from a win-loss perspective haven't necessarily been there for Northern Arizona, but it's important to remember that of their first 6 or 7 losses of this season, no pun intended there, they didn't have Garrett on the roster before. Ever since his insertion in that game against Iowa, they've been flirting with a near 500 record. So certainly not an afterthought in any game that they play. They certainly weren't last year, despite a 2-14 finish. But they'll look for another complete effort here, playing some really solid ball, especially with some key takeaways on defense, with Daiwan Griffin earning Defensive Player of the Week honor last week as well, thanks to 3 interceptions, 2 of which went the other way for touchdowns. So that's the test that Tucson is going to have to do to try to get some vengeance on this Northern Arizona team. Jerome Johnson, fully expected to start at quarterback, even though he was banged up and taken out of last week's game against the Arizona Rattlers. The absence from the second half of that game was simply precautionary, with the game's outcome slipping further and further out of hand. I think he should start regardless of whether or not Tucson knows their playoff fate by the time that this game kicks off. But some other notable performers there, they've got Brandon Mackey, Javian Lofton, Jatavian Tolles as some of their best offensive players. Defensively, another very, very sneaky team that could cause havoc to a potential playoff frontrunner in the Western Conference. Zach Twardowski and Breon Murray in the secondary as part of a pretty stacked defensive backfield there. And then you got guys like Rafiq Abdul-Wahid and Tyquaze Legs on the defensive line as well. So both defenses have been playing very, very solid, and I've had a number of guys rise up as stars of the moment, if you will. So this is going to be another great game. In-state rivalry. My pick is going to be Tucson on the money line. I'm going to keep things a little bit simpler here for my play of the week. This is my Mortal Mega Max bet. But a lot of this, again, follows the logic that we've been talking about throughout the prediction sequence this week. If San Diego wins, that's going to increase the likelihood of a San Antonio win, which is then going to increase the likelihood of Tucson pulling out all the stops to try to continue to put pressure or try to finalize their spot in the playoffs. Because again, looking forward to next week, San Antonio goes to 1-win Iowa, whereas Tucson has to go on the road and battle San Diego. So there certainly is a case made here where if Tucson lets the Wranglers stick around and steal this game late, it's not hyperbole to say that San Antonio might be the more likely team to get that fourth and final playoff spot. So I think regardless of what happens here, Coach Rayshon Kaiser is going to have, the approach of, we're going to field a full roster here and we're going to go out and execute and take our revenge on this team. Which, again, like we said at the top, has not won on the road in nearly 2 years. In fact, Northern Arizona's last win on the road coming at Bay Area on the heels of what was a 25-point come-from-behind victory in the second half of that one. Very, very memorable game that actually ended up earning Sports Coast to Coast nomination as the game of the year that season. So, in the end here, though, I do have Tucson winning to close out the week. For our parlays of the week, my individual three-legger has New Mexico and San Diego going over 83.5 on the strength of San Diego's overall 9-5 over record, as well as the fact that each of New Mexico's last 3 games on the road have gone over their respective point totals. This is also not a very prohibitive number at all. It is below the key number of 84, which is 12 touchdowns plus corresponding point afters. And I was going to have to take an over-under somewhere this week, so makes sense to do the one that is actually the second lowest implied total of the week, with only San Antonio, Arizona being less. So that is the first leg to kick things off. We then move to Sunday afternoon with San Antonio at plus 10.5. We do take the quote-unquote teaser leg on this one. But yeah, again, a San Diego win here opens the door for San Antonio to certainly make this number, potentially win the game outright, as Arizona is going to worry a lot more about managing the reps of their stars than they are actually going out and winning this game. All that San Antonio has to do is execute, not shoot themselves in the foot, literally and figuratively, and I do like the chances of that pick holding true. And then to wrap that one up, the Tucson Sugar Skulls on the money line, doubling down on our main game pick. I did think about minus 4.5 here a little bit, but again, in an opportunity where we can take the points away out of the equation and still wind up above our odds requirement, it makes total sense to just trust Tucson to win and put a little bit of trust in that 15-0 system that is in play, which is Northern Arizona losing whenever they are the visiting team. So those 3 picks in tandem gives out a plus 466 payout. For my collaborative terrific triumvirate of this week, in which I work closely with fellow IFL enthusiasts, Trey from Off the Wall and Cody from In the Alley. We start off the attempt with my pick of Tulsa at minus 10.5. Again, looking at the body of results of Quad City on the road, not great at all. And let's be honest, we're also backing the hottest team in the IFL. So unless we get a sudden reversal in this game or some wacky situation happens in the game, this should be a double-digit victory for Tulsa that is hopefully not 10 points, because technically that would be a double-digit margin of victory, but we'd be on the wrong side of it. But Tulsa fully capable of this one. Again, backdoor cover to worry about, as there always is when taking a favorite. But this one just makes a lot of sense to me. As for Cody, he's going with San Diego at minus 20.5. This is actually a pick that all 3 of us share on our individual cards, which makes it an official squad ride for the week. So always love to see when that unfolds the way that it does. New Mexico against the spread have been one of the teams that have struggled the most. I believe a 5-9 record overall, and I believe only 1 cover on the road, which was a mid-season battle with the Jacksonville Sharks, where they kept their margin of defeat to 11 when the spread was 18.5. So that's been very much more the exception than it has been the rule, especially considering where New Mexico's past 6 road losses have come by at least 26 points apiece. So, against one of the highest performing teams in the league, San Diego minus 20.5. Again, a classic don't overthink it pick. Our boy Trey it off the wall, looking for points in the Northern Arizona Tucson game. Very, very interesting pick there. I definitely understand the argument for it. A lot of it's going to depend on whether Northern Arizona is able to keep up their hot form on offense on the road in a building that has historically swallowed up some of the best offenses that the IFL has had to offer. So for Anthony Garrett, he's going to have to try to silence the crowd as best he can, continue to execute at the same level that he had been accustomed to in his past few Northern Arizona starts at home. And then Tucson, you're hoping for Jerome Johnson to be okay, fully healthy 100% for this game. Because aside from that game last week where he got injured, the Sugar Skulls have averaged over 47 points in Johnson's 5 prior starts with the team. So against the Northern Arizona defense that has given up points despite some pretty solid playmaking in the past few weeks, we'll have to see if the over 84.5 is in play there. You got some pretty good kickers in that game too. Ben Woodard for Tucson and fan favorite Manny Higuera for Northern Arizona. So maybe we get some field goals, maybe we get some deuces that help contribute to that total. So each of those legs is minus 110. That combines to a plus 95 typical payout for a 3-leg treble. So yeah, those are the set of predictions for the week. That unfortunately got cut out from my original video, but hopefully this one stays away from any sort of screening. But yeah, that is my spiel on week 19. Hope you guys enjoyed this weekly preview. Give the video a like and the channel a subscribe if you would like. Definitely helps the channel get some exposure and grow the game. Until next time, I'll see y'all at the cashier.